We'll begin our look at our third chapter, Scatterplots and Linear Regression. First, some vocabulary. Up until now, we've been considering univariate data, or one list of data at a time. We take that list and perhaps make a histogram, or a dot plot, or even a box plot. But now it's time to move to bivariate data, where we'll upload two lists of data at a time, an X list and a Y list, and the data will be linked or paired. We'll be looking at ordered pairs that go together. That means that much of the time, one variable will be our X variable, our independent variable, our explanatory variable, whereas the other one will be Y, the response variable, the dependent variable. Anytime we're looking at cause and effect, the X variable will come first, and as the X variable changes, it will cause a response in the Y variable. Now, there won't always be an obvious explanatory or response relationship. For example, if I was wondering about the relationship between SAT math scores and SAT verbal scores, well, I don't think math prowess necessarily causes verbal to be any higher or lower. I don't think verbal is the X that necessarily causes changes in math. They're just two equally important variables for a student. So we'll see how it goes, problem by problem, whether there's an obvious X and Y or not. Also be on the lookout for words you've seen before, like quantitative versus categorical, and discrete versus continuous. So let's go down and think about scatterplots. You've all seen scatterplots before, you've made them before in previous math classes. As you start making scatterplots in this chapter, think about whether the scatter shows a pattern. Often it will be linear, the points will be hugging a line, but sometimes it'll be quadratic, making a parabola. Be ready for scatterplots to look exponential. Could be growth, could be decay. And maybe the points are downward sloping, downward curving. Also, keep an eye out for how strong the points show a pattern. Do they really hug a line tightly, or is it sort of a loose pattern, moderate strength? Is it really weak with the points all over the plot, like static on your TV? Are the points showing a positive trend, or are they downward sloping a negative trend? Meaning as X gets higher, does Y also grow? Or as X gets larger, does Y decrease? And finally, have language for outliers or changes in the pattern. Is something unusual going on with the trend you see? So when I'm looking at this first scatter plot at the bottom, I'm noticing that there is an X variable. In this case it says husband's age for many married couples. Then the Y variable was the wife's age. This is an example where it doesn't really matter who's X and who's Y. We could have interchanged them. We definitely see a positive linear pattern that's strong. Those points are hugging a line. In our second scatter plot, we see a downward trend, a negative slope, but maybe linear isn't quite the best fit. Maybe we would model this trend with some sort of curved mathematical model. In the third scatter plot, I'm noticing that there's an outlier down here in the corner. It'd be interesting to find out what is the story there, or in the second one, why is that point a little bit higher, or why is that point way up at the top of the screen? So these are the type of things we'll be getting into in this chapter, and of course we'll be making our own scatter plots on our TI. I loaded up data for problem 5 in the book. You'll see that soon. It's about manatees, those big sea creatures who live off the Gulf Coast in warm waters. This L1 contains the number of powerboat registrations, how many motorboats there were in thousands off the coast of Florida. And in L2, unfortunately, how many manatee deaths were recorded that year. If we make a scatter plot, turn our plot on, it's the first icon, and always remember to hit zoom 9, we can have a visual of this XY relationship. And as suspected, the more and more powerboats we had in Florida, the more manatee deaths we experience. So we'll try to describe that model in more detail when we get to it in homework. Hope that was a nice preview of scatterplots.